Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video I'll be turning this long African print skirt into this really cute skirt set. So if you want to see how I made this, just keep on watching. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay my skirt on my work surface, and I'm just going to start by cutting off the waistband, which will kind of give us a clearer view of the fabric that we're working with. So once you cut off the waistband, if you are starting from fabric that you've bought from the store, this is kind of what it will look like a rectangle. I've folded my fabric in half so it's easier to work with. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark out my waist measurement times 3, and that is going to be the width of my skirt. Also note that because I'm cutting on fold, that measurement, so my waist times 3, will be divided by 2. And so I'm marking that out, so that's 39 inches for me. So I'm marking that out on fold all the way down, and then drawing a line to connect the dots. The next measurement that I'm taking is the desired length that I want the skirt to be. Noted, so I've measured down on myself to see how long I want the skirt to be, minus the waistband, which will be 2 inches. And then I've just made sure to add an extra 1.5 inches to that measurement for seam allowance. I'll put the skirt pattern on the screen so you can gauge the measurements that you need to take to make this skirt fit for you. Once I've taken or marked out my length and the width measurements, I'm going to go ahead and grab my rotary cutter and my cutting board and cut out those measurements. So you should be left with a really kind of long square, or rectangle rather, once you cut out those measurements. Then I'm going to mark out and cut out my waistband measurements. Again, I will put a pattern on the screen. For the waistband, we are cutting 2 pieces. And also as a note, because we are using an elastic band for this skirt, I'm taking the circumference of my hips rather than my waist, because we want to make sure that the skirt can pass over our hips so we can put it on and take it off easily as well. Once you have cut out those pieces, we can jump onto our sewing machine. So the first stitch that we're going to make is to gather the skirt. So it's a gathered skirt that we're making, and to make those gathers, I'm turning the stitch length to 4, I'm turning the tension to 0, and I'm just going to do a straight stitch going all the way along the length of the skirt, and I'm going to be using that stitch that we're doing to help gather the thread. So what I'll say as a note is, when you're doing this stitch, don't press the reverse button on the machine, because we want to use the thread to gather the skirt afterwards, and I'll show you how I do that in a second. So this part, I wouldn't say it's the hardest part, but it can be a tiny bit challenging. So what I'm doing is I've laid out my skirt that I've stitched across, and I'm laying out my waistband parallel to that as well. So what we want to do is we want to gather the skirt so it's the same length as the waistband. And to do that, what I'm doing is, as you can see in the clip, I am pulling one of the threads that we stitched earlier to kind of gather it, and I'm using my finger to move the fabric along to distribute those gathers along the entire length of the skirt. I'll say take your time doing this, because I've had that issue before where I've pulled too hard and snapped the fabric, or snap the thread rather, and then it's really difficult to go ahead and kind of gather it from that point. So I'll say take your time to distribute those gathers evenly, and you can use both ends of the fabric and use the threads to kind of distribute it evenly and make those gathers. When you're happy with the gathers on the skirt and it's the same length as the waistband, I'm going to stitch down the length of the skirt to join those 2 sides together. So to do that, I'm folding it together right sides facing, and I'm doing a roll hem. So I'm folding it once by 1/2 inch, and then folding it again, and just grabbing my pins to pin along the length of the skirt. What I'm going to do as well is press those seams flat and then stitch it on my sewing machine. So for the waistband of the skirt, from the pattern you could see that there are 2 waistbands that we're cutting out. Initially I made the mistake of making one, so I'm going ahead and correcting that mistake. So once I have the waistband pieces, I'm going to lay them out, and as you can see I'm folding it in half, right side's facing, and I'm pinning the length, and then I'm going to stitch that down as well. I'm repeating that for both of the waistband pieces that you see here. Then I'm popping over to my sewing machine and I'm stitching the length of the skirt that we pinned earlier, and again I'm going to go ahead and stitch the waistband that we just pinned as well. Once I've made those stitches, it's time to attach the waistband to the skirt. So to do that, I am grabbing the first waistband, and this one is going to be facing out, or right sides out, and I'm going to make sure that the seam that we stitched on the waistband is lined up with the seam that we stitched for the skirt, and I'm just going to pin that and then line up the rest of the skirt. So this waistband is going to sit neatly inside of the width or the circumference of the skirt, as you can see. And once I've done that, I'm taking my second waistband and I'm going to do the same thing, so lining up that seam that we stitched with the seam of the skirt, and I'm going to make sure that that waistband sits outside of the skirt. So what you should be left with is 3 layers that you're working with, and it will be a case where you're pinning through those 3 layers all the way around the circumference of the skirt, and I'll show you what that looks like once it's pinned as well. Once I've pinned around the circumference of the skirt, I'm going to go ahead and go back onto my sewing machine and just stitch all the way around to attach the waistband onto the skirt. Once I've joined the waistband with the skirt, I've flipped it right sides out so you can see what we're working with. And then the next step is to hem the waistband. So to do that, what I'm going to do is fold in. So there's 2 pieces that we're working with at the moment. There's the waistband that is outside of the skirt, and then there's the waistband that is inside the skirt, and we want to connect the 2. So what I'm doing is I'm folding in the waistband by 1/2 inch on the outside and the inside, and I'm going to pin that together, and I'm going to do that all around the circumference of the skirt, and then it will, so as hopefully the clip that I'm showing will explain it a bit better, but like I said, I folded in 1/2 inch for the top of the waistband and the waistband that is inside, and I'm connecting that together and just pinning it all the way around. This should give you a clearer visual of what we're working with. So I have pinned both sides of the waistband by 1/2 inch, and I've pinned the waistband together all around the top, all around the circumference rather. And then what I'm going to do is, you can either use a straight stitch and stitch all the way around, granted leave a 1 inch gap for seam allowance, or you can use an invisible stitch just to stitch all the way around instead. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just going in by hand and doing an invisible stitch to make sure that the waistband looks really neat and seamless. In this close-up, to do an invisible stitch, I'm going to pass my needle through one of the, almost the very top of the waistband, as you can see. So I'm picking up a tiny bit of the fabric on one side, and then I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of the fabric on the other side, and I'm just going to pass my needle through all the way. And what that will do, it will join the pieces or the fabric together, but you won't be able to see the stitch that we've made, which is exactly what we want. So I'm just doing it again for demonstration purposes, and I'm doing that all around the skirt. I've left a gap unstitched so I can pass through my elastic band. If you have a 2-inch waistband, I would recommend using a 2-inch wide elastic. For me, I only had the 1 inch on hand, so that's what I ended up using. And what I'm doing, I'm simply passing, or I've used a safety pin to put it through my elastic, and then I'm going to use that to thread the elastic through the gap that I've left unsewn, and I'm just passing that all the way around the circumference of the waistband until it pops out the other side, and then I'm going to stitch it down. So I'm pinning the elastic together, and then I'm going to stitch it on my sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch a square around, as you'll be able to see, to make sure that it's really secure. We're finally at the last step for this skirt. So once you have added in your elastic, remember to go back and close that 1 inch or the gap that you left to pass the elastic through. And then for the hem, what I'm doing is I'm doing a rolled hem, so I'm folding it in by 1/2 inch and then folding it again, and I'm pinning all the way around, and then I'm just going to stitch that with a straight stitch on the sewing machine. I'd say a trick to sewing with African print or woven fabric is using your iron as much as possible. So before I'm doing most of these stitches, I'm going ahead and pressing it. So that's going to make sure that your seams are really flat and that the end product looks really neat as well. So at this point I was like, why not make a wrap top with the scrap fabric? So to do that, ideally the length of the top should be your waist measurement times 3. And for the width, so we want this top to cover our entire boob. So to do that, I'm measuring from the middle of your chest, or the middle of my chest, to the end of my bust, or just underneath my armpit, and that should be the width measurement. And then add in 2 inches total, so that you have 1 inch seam allowance on both sides of the top. After I cut out the wrap top, I'm doing a rolled hem all around the perimeter of the top. So I'm folding it by 1/2 inch and I'm folding it again. I'm pinning it all the way around. Then I'm going to press those seams so it's flat, and I'm going to stitch it on my sewing machine. And once I've done that, I'm done. This wrap top literally took like 5 minutes to make. It's such an easy tutorial and it's so versatile as well. This is the final result. I'm in love with how many different ways you can wear this wrap top. And then the skirt is elastic, so it fits different sizes as well. Do let me know if you did enjoy this tutorial. I will be selling this skirt set on my Depop shop, so make sure you click the link on my bio if you want to grab it. If you want more inspo on things to sew or wear in summer, make sure you check out these sewing tutorials.